Hi, this is Natalie Hoffman of FlyingFreeNow.com, and you're listening to the Flying Free Podcast, a support resource for women of faith looking for hope and healing from hidden emotional and spiritual abuse. Welcome to episode 110 of the Flying Free Podcast. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to, well, maybe I don't have to introduce you. Maybe you already know Rebecca Davis. I've known Rebecca for several years. She is the author of Untwisting Scriptures that were used to tie you up, gag you, and tangle your mind. And I just have to say, I thought that's a long title, but it's actually only 15 words. And when I looked at the title of my book, which Rebecca contributed a section to, the title of my book is 18 words. So there must be something about you and me and big, long titles. I don't know.
Long titles.
Anyway.
The message across.
What?
It gets the message across.
It's that exactly. It tells people exactly what the book is about. So Rebecca also has a blog that she writes amazing articles on. It's called Here's the Joy. So check that out if you haven't already. She wrote, like I mentioned, she wrote a section in chapter 7 of my book. Her section was called God and Divorce. And I was really thankful that she wrote about that because at the time, I really didn't want to tackle that too much. But she has come out with a brand new book. And I am one of the people that thought, you know, when I read your first book, I thought, oh my gosh, there's like a million scriptures that we need to untwist. And this covered, how many did it cover? It really only covered a couple of areas, right?
3 areas, yes.
Okay, tell us what those were.
Yielding rights, biblical bitterness, and taking up offenses.
Okay, so I'm really excited to know that you actually had intended to turn this into a series of books, right?
Yes, always we're thinking that way.
Tell us about that plan and what happened.
Well, the first book came out in 2016, and I thought I can do a book a year. That shouldn't be a problem. So here we are 4 years later, a little out 4.5 years actually. And I'm coming out with a second book and I'm just going, oh, well, that's the way life goes.
That's right.
I did do one other book in between there, or two other books in between there. One was Rock Bottom and Faithless with Sue Perisher. And then another was Prayer Armor for Defense Against the Enemy's Flaming Darts. So I was still writing. Right. I just didn't get to this second one till now.
Right. Yeah. You've been really busy and you've been writing on your blog and you've been helping a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. So this book is addressing patriarchy and authority. And why did you pick that? Why did you pick those two subjects to tackle next?
Well, there were so many choices. My goodness, how did I
know? You could be writing for the rest of your life.
I could, I'm sure. I had done some blog posts about patriarchy back, I'm embarrassed to say how long ago, but a few years ago now. And someone said to me, I would love for you to make those blog posts into just like a booklet, because I'd love to give them to my parents. Because they don't read blogs, but they read books. And so that was in the back of my mind all this time. And so eventually that was the decision. That's why I chose these.
Okay. So who is this book written specifically for? Who's going to be like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I need to unlearn?
I am telling you, I keep that person right in front of me the whole time I'm writing. I'll discuss the book with my husband and he'll say, oh, you should say this or that or the other thing. And I'll say, that's not my target audience. So my target audience is people who are coming out of patriarchy. And, you know, to be frank, I told someone recently, it feels like this book should have come out 10 years ago, because that's when people were really starting to come out of patriarchy.
Yeah.
But I know that many of them are still, even though they've come out, it's still in their heads somewhere, and they're going to counseling for it. And sometimes with the first book, some people told me, I gave this book to my counselor so she could understand what I came from. And so I'm thinking that about this one too, that that's a possibility. And also, some people, they have a lot of trouble reading the Bible, especially certain scriptures, because it's in their heads a certain way.
Yeah.
and they still want to follow Jesus. I'm writing for people who still want to follow Jesus, but they have to put those scriptures somewhere in a back closet because they don't know what to do with them. So I'm saying, okay, let's clean out the closet. Let's pull out those scriptures and actually look at them and say, where's the heart of God in this? And that can help people walk in much greater freedom. So the book is in 4 parts. The first part is patriarchy, specifically to young people, or some of them aren't even very young anymore, but people who came out, they grew up in it. Mm-hmm. And then the second part is church authorities. So
I love this because I do talk to a lot of women who they aren't, well, some do just throw out the whole thing. They're just like, I feel like everything I learned was a lie.
Yes.
Therefore, maybe the whole Bible is a lie. Maybe
Yes.
I've been deceived in everything. And they just it's easier for them at this point in their journey to just kind of set the whole thing aside and forget about it for a while.
I understand. Yes.
But other people are saying, I don't want to do that. I'm not ready to do that. And how do I make sense of all of this? And so I love that I would probably fall into that category. So I love how you're actually helping those people. We don't have to throw out the Bible, but maybe we need to take a closer look at what it actually says, because the people bring their own bias and to a reading of anything, really, because our brains kind of filter out what we don't want to believe, and they bring to the they want to prove what we do believe. So we'll bring that bias to the table when we read the Bible. And if you've got a whole history of white males bringing their bias to the table when they read the Bible, what are you going to get? What are you going to get? What are you going to learn in the seminaries? What are you going to learn from the pulpit?
So you talked about those 2 groups, one who still wants to follow Jesus and one who has thrown everything out. The group who's thrown everything out is a group I do often pray for, because I hope that eventually they'll want to come back and know the real Jesus. And so that's part of my audience. I keep them in my mind when I write, because I hope that one day they'll be ready to find out who he really is. Because if they were in a cult, which is who this book is for, if they were in a cult, then they didn't get to know the real Jesus.
Right. And that that's probably a good segue into the next question, which is, what is your big picture? What's your overarching theme or point that you want to make sure that people walk away when they're done with this book that they know?
Okay, that's a good question. I want them to know that I don't want to just say, okay, everything you were taught was a lie. Now go on your way and peace be with you. I want them to understand the truth. And the truth is, God, who came in the flesh in the Lord Jesus Christ, is our ultimate authority. And people, when we're talking about adult to adult, people don't have spiritual authority over other people. But we do. The last chapter addresses our authority as believers in Jesus Christ. And that's when I dip into like Spiritual Warfare 101, just a little, I hope, what will feel like a little touch into the spirit realm, that we have spiritual authority. He gave us that. But when it comes to other people, I feel like the words come into my head, you're not the boss of me, but
right.
But it's I answer to God. And if you can point out where I am disobeying God in what I'm doing, then I want to hear it. But I don't want to hear just, well, you're disobeying God because you're disobeying me. I don't want to hear that.
Right. And that's the hard thing to parse out, though, because people will say, there's even, I don't want to get into the whole political thing right now, but I'll just say in general, there's a sense of, well, if you don't believe this, then you're disobeying God, because this is God's way. Like, this is how you raise kids God's way. This is how you do marriage God's way. But it's actually, so then that strikes fear in the heart of especially younger Christians. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh my gosh, I want to do it God's way.
Of
and
course.
This person says it's God's way and even has Bible verses to back them up. And
Mhm.
so that's what I think causes all the confusion, rather than just saying, hey, you know what, you're on your journey, you're figuring out the parenting thing. If we do the raising kids thing, you're figuring out the parenting thing. Like, learn all that you can, apply wisdom to the situation. And I support you and I love you. And I'm going to support you and your children in your parenting journey. And I hope you do the same for me. And then then we're free to make mistakes if we need to. We're free to, because I just feel like all of the fear and the being hemmed in and wondering if you turn to the right or to the left, if you're going to make a massive mistake that's going to, send your children on the slippery slope to hell, and it's going to
Mhm.
be all your fault. That
Mhm.
is the fear that I think Christian women in my sphere of influence are really struggling with big time. And
I
it
can,
affects everything in their lives.
yes, I can see that. I want, I, I do point out that true leaders are people who are farther down the path than we are. And in the case of Christian leaders, they have a life of integrity. They truly know the Lord. They live in a way that is exemplary, both in public and in private and in secret. And so I want to listen to leaders like that. And if they say something to me about how their children all grew up loving God and loving others, I want to listen to that. So if I were to say to people, well, love is the overarching thing when you raise children. And honestly, Natalie, I could go back to my own child raising and I just cringe. I go, oh, I did this wrong, I did this wrong, and I did this wrong. And I did that wrong and that wrong and that wrong. And my children, I'm sure, would be glad to contribute to the list. They're all grown now. But I know that love is the overarching, if you want to call it a rule or whatever,
Yeah.
in raising children.
Yeah. Right.
We love them. We love God. We love others. That's the bottom line.
Right. And when you talk about, you want to listen to people who are mature and who are exemplary in these different areas of their lives, you do. But
Mhm.
those are the kinds of people who are probably not going to be saying, you better do this,
This
you
is
better do
God's
that.
way. Right. Right.
Exactly. Those people
Right.
are the kinds of people that, because love is the foundation and the core of who they are and how they're living, they are extending that love to everyone around them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's
So
quite different.
yeah. So let's talk about leaders that maybe didn't do that. So you mentioned in your first book, you dropped a few names like Bill Gothard, Nancy Lee DeMoss. I'm wondering if you talked about them in this next. Do you talk about different kinds of like specific teachings of specific people in this second book?
Nancy Lee DeMoss didn't make it into this book. I just
Poor Nancy.
I just finished rereading it, and she's not there.
Okay.
But Bill Gothard is all through it because he is. Wait a minute! No. Nancy was there. I just remember there was one little quote, and Bill Gothard is center stage because he is the big authority teacher, and honestly, he influenced so many people. And even though he's fallen from grace, so to speak, now, his influence is still so prominent. And so, yes, I have several chapters devoted to Bill. And let's see, like his umbrella, of course, had to get in there. This is a book about authority. How do you not write a book without having the umbrella in it?
Exactly.
Anybody who doesn't know Bill Gothard, I'm just glad you don't. But for those who do know who I'm talking about when I say Bill Gothard, then that material is all addressed.
Right.
John Bevere, he wrote the book Undercover, How God Will Bless You When You're Under Your Authority. I can't remember the subtitle, but it's something like that. And he gets a chapter. Okay. So they're different people. I'm not afraid to name names, as I wasn't in the first book. But I don't have, one thing that's a little different is I didn't have a lot of standout quotes. In the first book, I had the quotations in the gray boxes. For some reason, that didn't happen in this book. I'm not sure why not, but I do still tackle the teachings.
Okay. Did you have any experience with these teachings? Like, were you one of those families that went that direction and got into the whole ATI Bill Gothard thing?
I tell my story in the book. I was a Bill Gothard fan. I would have been in the Bill Gothard fan club if there had been a Facebook group for that in those days. But that was in the 1970s and 80s, and we weren't on Facebook in those days. But my husband decided he didn't want to do ATI because he didn't want someone else telling us how to raise our children. And I thought, oh, well, okay, that's that. So I didn't go through it. I didn't go through Patriarchy again. I thought it sounded so intriguing, but my husband didn't want to do it. So I thought it would be too weird if I insisted on it when I'm supposed to be showing my submission.
Yeah.
Being in a patriarchal family. So we just didn't. We went on our own journey, and then I came back to learning what had happened. And I tell all that in the book.
Well, I think you were spared. You were spared a lot.
I see it so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I was raised on Bill Gothard. I was went to Bill Gothard seminars every year when they came to the Twin Cities.
Well, I went probably 5 times when I was young, but it wasn't my parents doing it, and it wasn't my husband doing it. It was in between life with parents and life with husband. So
yeah. Okay.
I loved it, and I was always studying his red notebook, and my mother said, "Why are you studying that thing?"
Yes. There must be some, I think there's a personality type that kind of gravitates towards all of the clear black and white. Give me the rule book and I will, I am all in.
Well, he seemed so wise.
Yeah.
But anyway, he made me nauseous when I was trying to listen to him to do research. So
yeah, I can't even, I literally get triggered when I hear stuff. So yeah. So anyway, all right. I'm glad people like you are willing to dive into the swamp.
I'm wading into the muck.
Exactly. Hey, if you're a woman of faith in a confusing and painful marriage who feels like you're just a shadow of the woman you used to be, I'd like to help you change that. 4 years ago, I developed a comprehensive program that has helped hundreds of Christian women exactly like you go from being a caterpillar to a butterfly in full color, flying with strength, confidence, joy, and freedom. The Flying Free program uses transformational coaching, workshops, classes, and a close-knit community of women to support you on your journey. We will help you identify the problems and figure out what you can and can't do so that you will be empowered to move forward into the life you were created to live. Registration is opening on Thursday, March 25th through April 2nd. It won't be open again until October of 2021, so don't miss out on this opportunity to change the course of your entire life. Learn more and get on the waiting list at joinflyingfree.com. And now, back to our episode. Okay, so you said you wanted to write for the young people who were raised in this system, but what about the people that I work with are mostly the moms of those people, and in my situation, my husband kind of went along with me because I was the one that was sort of yes, we really need to do this. And I was kind of like you, Rebecca, only my husband was very passive and he wasn't, he didn't, this is my ex-husband. He did not, he would not have said, no, we're not going to do that. He just kind of went, he was just like, well, whatever, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. So we did it, but, and there has been a lot of fallout in my own family with my own kids, my older ones, mainly because my younger ones I'm raising quite differently. But, what about those moms? What about the moms whose husbands did say, we are going to do this. This is exactly how it is. And you're going to homeschool and you're going to do this and you're going to do that.
There is an appendix. That's what I was proofreading when we got on our call. The appendix is called The Matriarchs of Patriarchy. And it talks about Mary Pride, who wrote The Way Home in 1985 when she was 30 years old.
Oh, wow. I had no idea she was that young when she wrote that book. I loved that book. Like I devoured that.
Oh, yes. So did I.
She was just a
And
kid.
yes, she was. She was just a kid. That's how it seems now. But we were just kids too.
True.
But she seemed so wise, and she seemed older.
Yeah.
But anyway, that appendix, which is written by a young person, I didn't write the appendix. I asked a person who grew up in patriarchy to write it, and she talked about the generation of her mother, which is my generation, and how they devoured Mary Pride, and many of them, more women jumped on the patriarchy bandwagon than men, and their husbands were passive. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
And the husbands said, oh, whatever, I don't care. And so families went into it with the women at the helm. So that's why it's called the matriarchs of patriarchy. And then in the appendix, she explains the fallout. Now, the reason I put this chapter in the appendix instead of as part of the regular book is because the book is called Untwisting Scriptures, and this appendix doesn't have any scriptures in it. It's just like a history lesson. This is what happened over the course of the last 35 years. So that is definitely laying out what happened. But the first, I would say, 8 chapters, 6 to 8 chapters, are written for the young people who came out of patriarchy, although I know the mothers and fathers who were stuck in it can receive help from it too, because most of these were blog posts originally, and I heard from people who were helped by them. Then section 3 or part 3 is about oppressive churches, and mostly that's mothers whose church leaders told them stay in your abusive marriage. So it isn't directed quite as much to women of my generation. Some of it definitely is, but I'm confident that women of my generation and your generation could benefit from the material in it.
Well, I absolutely think they can, because even the women that I work with that have kind of relearned a lot of things and they are moving forward in their lives, they still, the brain's programming it's very difficult it takes time to rewire.
Yes, it does. And I talk about the voices that are still in your head.
Yeah. So
many people have told me when I read scripture, I hear it through either the ex-husband's voice or the father's voice or the pastor's voice. And I'm having trouble getting that voice away from the scripture.
Yeah. So it's not really your adult self. You've already kind of figured it out, and you know what you want to believe now, and you even believe it. But that your physical brain has been programmed for so long. Those synapses are in there. It's literally just a science issue that's going on. I even mentioned brain science in there. Yeah. So when you read books like this, though, it helps your physical brain. It's kind of like washing it. It's like it's been marinated in saline solution, and now we got to wash it in some clean water for a while. So that
there you go.
Rinse out the salt.
Yes, well, my longing is for them to see all of my audience to see the true heart of God.
Yeah.
The true heart of God, who God really is, because I hear so much. Well, I always just thought he was waiting for me to do something wrong so he could pounce on me.
Yes.
And I want them to see the heart of God, that he loves his children. He loves them.
Yeah.
And he doesn't love them holding his nose and picking them up with two fingers. It's that he holds them gently like his beloved sheep. I mean, this is just like, that permeates my thinking when I write, that he loves you.
Yeah.
If you're his child. Yes.
That's beautiful. I want to just touch on one other thing that we kind of skimmed over a little bit. You mentioned that you've got this last part that talks about the matriarchs of patriarchy. And I want to bring that up because I know a lot of my listeners would put themselves in that category. I put myself in that category. Although I just want to say to them that even though we put ourselves in that category, we did not want to be the matriarchs. There is a dynamic that was very common, I think, that where the men would be very passive and they wouldn't take leadership of their family, or they wouldn't, I mean, not that they, like, I'm remarried now and I would say we have a very egalitarian marriage. He's not the leader and I'm not the leader, and there's no leader or follower. We work together. Yes. We're like a team. We work together. Yes. And it's beautiful. It's amazing. I had no idea that this was a reality for anybody. It's so incredible. But anyway, I just was brought up with, there has to be a leader and there has to be a follower, and you can't, and that's just the way it is in marriage. And so, and I did not want to be, my mom wore the pants in the family that I grew up in. And my dad was very passive. So I did not want to be like my mom. I wanted my husband to be the leader, and I wanted to nurture him and just support him and do all of that. But
Natalie, that's funny, because it was the same for me. My mother was the boss, and I did not want to be like that. I wanted my husband to be the boss.
But in that desire, though, it sounds like your husband at least had the gumption enough to say, no, we're not going to do that. I don't want to do that.
But I agree with you. I didn't have the concept. But however, when my daughter was thinking about a certain person she was thinking about marrying, she said, I'm just not sure if he'll be a good leader. And I said to her, honey, you don't want somebody to be walking in front of you with you walking behind. You want to be walking shoulder to shoulder. You want to be walking together. Right. And I was giving her these symbolisms with my hands, and I thought, oh boy, somebody's going to think I'm egalitarian now.
Oh, God forbid that you be egalitarian. Well, yeah, and I actually don't really know where you stand on. We won't go there, but I just want to say to those women who are feeling like I did for so long, like, oh, I just didn't want to be, I don't want to think of myself as the matriarch of the patriarchy. I just really wanted to support and love my husband, and he.
Yes. And that appendix does talk about that how much the women wanted their husbands to be the leaders. And the matriarchs of patriarchy it isn't really indicated that these wives are those matriarchs. The matriarchs were people like Mary Pride, Jenny Chancey, and other people like that who were telling the wives what to do.
Right. And I had a blog called Visionary Womanhood. Some of you are listening might even remember that, for years, where I actually promoted and regurgitated all of those women's teachings on my blog in different, in different ways. Yes. So I wasn't like a well-known matriarchy of the patriarchy, but I definitely fell into that category.
Well, the point was made in this appendix by the author that there were far more women bloggers promoting patriarchy than men bloggers promoting patriarchy.
Isn't that fascinating?
I don't get the dynamic there. I'm not sure about it, but it's very interesting.
You know what it is, though? I loved God with every fiber of my being.
Yes.
And if God told me to jump, I would say, how high do you want me to jump? I will jump, fly. I'll do whatever you want me to do. So when someone told me this is the way it is, when Bill Gothard said this is the way it is, I was all in. All in on that.
I get it.
So, and I wanted everyone to be all in, because why not? Why would we not want to do what God wants us to do, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So the problem is that what happened with a lot of us is we ended up with husbands who were not, even though we could have really passive husbands, they were, my husband would never have hit me or do any physical violence to me at all. He never swore, he kept himself really clean that way. But it was just a lot of the emotional abuse was so subtle, the criticism and the cutting down and the subtle attacks and the lies and the omissions and that kind of stuff, which I lived with from the, first day we were married, that kind of stuff, which just eroded at who I was as a human being. And that, so it's very difficult then for women to put together all of the pieces. It's so confusing. You've got this husband that you want to support, and yet he's kind of tearing you down, and yet you kind of think you deserve to be torn down because you are just a woman after all. And I mean, anyway, that's what my whole mission for the rest of my life is, just helping women kind of untangle that, really.
Yes. And I hope this will be a contribution to that. It takes a lot of pieces to put the puzzle together.
It really does.
And I see this book as one more piece
to
help with doing that.
Much needed. So what is this book also called Untwisting Scriptures, and then there's just a different subtitle?
Yes. Well, yes. So the first book should have had a subtitle of Book 1 and then telling what the topics were. But this one will have a subtitle of Book 2, Patriarchy and Authority.
Perfect. Oh my gosh, I can't wait. No, this episode is going to air on March 17th. Mm-hmm. When is your book going to be out?
Well, good question, but the aim is the end of February. I self-publish all my books and do all the formatting myself. Yeah, I'm in publishing and editing, so that's my job. And so the end of February is the goal.
Okay, so by the time this is out, you guys can go get it on Amazon, yes. I'm assuming, just like your other book, correct?
That's right, yes.
Okay, so this is Rebecca Davis is the author. The book is called Untwisting Scripture, Patriarchy and Authority?
Untwisting Scriptures that were used to tie you up, gag you, and tangle your mind. And this is Book 2, Patriarchy and Authority.
Okay, so you're keeping the beginning then?
I am.
You are, okay.
The whole thing.
All right. Well, it's definitely a good title, and it definitely evokes all of the emotions
yes. I wanted to touch on the emotions. People will say, that book is for me.
Exactly. It's been so much fun to reconnect with you, Rebecca, and I'm so glad that you are willing to come and share about your book with these listeners, and I wish you the best of luck. I think it's going to be amazing. So I'm definitely going to put it on my promote it on my blog and stuff so that as many people as possible can find out about this.
Thanks so much, Natalie. I really appreciate your having me on, and I hope the book will be helpful to many people.
All right. And so thanks for listening to the rest of you. Until next time, fly free.